Giuliani, Lindsey Graham, and others receive a subpoena to testify before a grand jury in a criminal investigation against Donald J. Trump, former president of the United States. Let's put up the picture of the district attorney who is leading the effort in this investigation. Her name is Fani Willis. She is the DA of Fulton County in the state of Georgia. That's where the city of Atlanta is. The Georgia Special Grand Jury is hearing evidence in an investigation into a possible 2020 election interference by former President Donald Trump and others connected to that interference. So now you have Senator Lindsey Graham and key members of Trump's legal team, including Rudy Giuliani and John Eastman, have all been subpoenaed. All right, they're part of it. The special grand jury was impaneled this year to assist the Fulton DA in investigating the matter. So let me explain what this grand jury actually does. It is a special use grand jury, which means it has amazing powers and then it has limited powers. So one of the amazing powers that this kind of grand jury has in the state of Georgia is that it can basically investigate anything and anybody connected to the investigation initially. So you don't have to be the target of the investigation. If something comes up and they see that this is something they need to get more information about, they can then issue a subpoena and bring you in to testify under oath. Now, there's a great limit to this kind of special use grand jury. While it does have the ability to operate for 12 months at a time, which is a long time for a grand jury, it cannot actually indict. If they find information that is criminal, they then have to make a recommendation of criminal indictment to another grand jury. We will call that the normative grand jury, in order for the indictment to take place. So this was a strategy obviously set out by the district attorney because Donald Trump tried to pressure Raffensperger, the Secretary of State Chief Elections Officer, to overturn the election in a recorded phone call. So the grand jury was a recent development in a long-running investigation. Ms. Willis, the DA, launched the criminal probe into Georgia's elections in February 2021, weeks after a recording of the Trump-Raffensperger phone call leaked. She's since expanded the investigation to include fake GOP electors, Giuliani's testimony to state lawmakers, and other efforts to pressure Georgia officials to act in Trump's favor. Now, here's a dynamic not really talked about. People are saying, and the headlines are proclaiming, that it was the DA who subpoenaed Giuliani, Lindsey Graham, and others. That is not true. The special use grand jury has to submit a request to a judge if the individual lives out of state. Let's put up the picture of the judge. I actually happen to know this judge. The subpoenas were filed July 5th and signed by Fulton Superior Court Judge Robert McBurney, who is overseeing the special grand jury. They noted that all 7 people were, and I quote, a necessary and material witness. Now that's important to understand. That means that according to the grand jury, these individuals are necessary and material to the criminal investigation into Donald Trump. All right, that's important. Unlike subpoenas issued to Georgians, the summons required the judge's signature because of the out-of-state factor. The subpoenas put more pressure on Trump's close associates. The 23-person special grand jury has already heard testimony in recent weeks from a parade of witnesses, including some who had direct contact with Trump and his associates in late 2020 and early 2021. But Tuesday's subpoenas are the closest jurors have gotten to the Trump campaign or inner circle of the former president, okay? This is going to be an interesting dynamic. Now, I said this from day one. If you investigate Trump, you have to investigate Lindsey Graham, because Senator Lindsey Graham made the very same phone call to Georgia officials about overturning the election. So in November 2020, a call between Lindsey Graham and Georgia Secretary of State, once again, Brad Raffensperger, played a major role in the subpoena. The subpoena said Graham, and I quote, made at least 2 telephone calls to Raffensperger and his staff. During the telephone calls, Graham questioned Secretary Raffensperger and his staff about re-examining certain absentee ballots cast in Georgia in order to explore the possibility of a more favorable outcome for former President Donald Trump. Graham also made reference to allegations of widespread voter fraud in the November 2020 election in Georgia, consistent with public statements made by known affiliates of the Trump campaign, the subpoena said. The grand jury is able to weigh and consider statements made on the record outside of their official testimony, but they do need to get them on the oath for their investigation. All right, A.B., thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure what else Giuliani has to lose. He done lost everything from his law license to the Beijing that they spray in his hair every week. Right. So that's gone. But I am great. Yeah, but I'm grateful that Fani is sticking to her pledge when she became DA of combating these gangs in the community, because that's exactly what this is. What happens in the dark will come to the light. And so I'm glad that this is being investigated. I look forward to seeing how these subpoenas work out, if they're gonna dip and dodge them, or if we're gonna actually see justice for this. But it's great to see someone in this type of leadership position to stand up for the democracy of our country while others are just letting it fall by the wayside. So shout out to Fani for that.
It's going to be interesting to see if they subpoena Donald Trump himself. Remember, the Constitution does not allow any special protection for a former president of the United States. He is just as indictable as anyone else. No protection whatsoever. Here's another dynamic that's going to be interesting to see, and this is an interplay with the current US Supreme Court. One of the claims from Giuliani during his proclamation in front of the Georgia legislature was that they could actually submit a different slate of electors by state law, which means to ignore the will of the voter and submit a different slate of electors that would in fact vote for Trump to be president, which is obviously antithetical to democracy. But here's what's interesting. The US Supreme Court, they are currently reviewing a case right now that would allow states to do exactly that legally. So they're looking at a case right now that would basically say the state has so much control that even if they decide to go against the will of the voters in their state, it will be legally permissible for the lawmakers to do so, for the governor to do so. All right, so that ruling is yet to come.